Hello, and in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to set up and configure an application load balancer in AWS. Now, before we actually dive in and start to create our application load balancer, I want to show you what I have pre-configured in my environment here so that you have a good understanding of what is going on. So over here in the Orion papers, I'm going to click on Elastic Load Balancer and then onto the Application ELB because this is going to be the architecture that we're going to set up. So over here, if I click on EC2, we're going to see that I currently have 4 instances running, and I want you to pay attention to the running instances here, so we can actually throw a filter on here. Instance state, and then running, so we can just filter down to the ones that are running. I have 4 EC2 instances created. Picture 1, Picture 2, which are in availability zone US East 1A, and then also Video 1 and Video 2, which are in availability zone US East 1B. So what I've done here is basically I've created this same architecture here. I have 2 EC2 instances, which are picture content or holding our picture content here. So picture 1 and picture 2. And then 2 EC2 instances here, which are holding our video content. So video 1 and video 2. Now on each one of these particular EC2 instances, what I've done is I've set up a health.html file, which is going to be used for health checks, but then also I've just put 2 identical files, one that says, hey, you've reached picture 1 or picture 2, and then one that says you have reached video 1 or video 2. So that's how we're going to be able to test our elastic load balancing once we have everything configured. So now that we have an understanding of what we want to set up and how it's going to look in terms of our architecture, let's go over to load balancing. But the first thing we actually want to do is create our target groups. Now you can create the load balancer first, but I generally like to create my target groups first and then go back and create the elastic load balancer and associate them with the target groups themselves. So here under target groups, let's click on create target group. So I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this one just picture or pictures. Protocol I'm going to use is HTTP over port 80. I want to select the proper VPC. I'm going to use my lab VPC because that is the VPC that I have those pictures and video EC2 instances set up in. For health checks, again, HTTP. And again, on all 4 of these EC2 instances, I've created a file called health.html, which is just going to be used specifically for the reason of the health check. So again, the health check is going to go over port 80 HTTP, and it's just going to make sure that it can reach the health.html file. Under advanced health check settings, I'm just going to change the healthy threshold to 2. That way we don't have to wait as long for the purpose of this video to make sure that our instances are healthy. And I'm going to click create. I'm then going to create another target group. I'll call this one videos. Again, I'm going to switch to the VPC that has my EC2 instances running. And I'll add the health check path here, which will be health.html. And again, I'll change this to 2 just for simplicity's sake. Okay, so now I have my 2 target groups created, but what I need to do is I actually now need to associate or attach, they call it registering, so I have to register the EC2 instances with the target group, because right now I just have the target group created, but I have to now make sure that I register the EC2 instances with those particular target groups. So under here, if I click on targets, and then I click under register targets here, I click on edit, what I need to do is I need to select the EC2 instances that I want associated with this particular target group. So again, this is my pictures target group. So I'm going to select pictures 1 and pictures 2. Click add register here. If you just click save, it won't save it. You have to actually click add register, see that they've been added up here, then click save. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the videos target group here. Click on edit. I'm going to add the videos EC2 instances. Click on add to register. And then click on save. Okay, so now I have both of my target groups set up with the specific EC2 instances placed inside them. Now again, these 2 EC2 instances have a file called pictures.html, which is going to represent our picture content, and these 2 EC2 instances have a file called videos.html, which are going to represent our video content. So now let's click on load balancers, click on create load balancer. So now we're going to create our application load balancer. So here, application load balancer, let's click on continue. Give this a name, I'll just call this application load balancer or application ELB. We want this to be internet facing because we're going to be serving traffic from the internet, not internal. For IP address, IPv4, we'll keep IPv4, but you can select dual stack. That will just create an elastic load balancer which can handle type IPv4 or IPv6, but we'll just stay on IPv4. For the listener, again, port 80. We don't have to add any other listeners. We're just going to use port 80 for now. Now, we do have to now select our availability zones, but again, make sure that you have selected the proper VPC, because again, my EC2 instances are located in my lab VPC. So here are the two availability zones that I want to select. And then in that, I have to select the subnet. Now, the subnets that these are in are going to be the public subnets. So I'm going to select public there. And then for here, I'll also select the lab 2 public subnet as well. So those are the two subnets that my EC2 instances are placed in each one of the availability zones. Next, we'll configure security settings. We're not going to set anything up for HTTPS right now, so I can just continue. For security group, let's just create a new security group. Make sure that we have port 80 open. That's very important. This will not work if the security group on the Elastic Load Balancer does not have a rule that is allowing traffic over port 80. Now it's going to ask us to register or add a target group to the Elastic Load Balancer. Now you can either, if you create your Elastic Load Balancer first, you can create a target group here, but since I already created 2 target groups, I can choose to add an existing target group. Now here you have to select one that is going to be the default target group associated with the application Elastic Load Balancer. For the purposes of this particular demonstration, it really doesn't matter which one to choose, so I'm going to choose pictures. And again, I want to leave protocol HTTP over port 80 and see if it just kind of filled in already what the health check is going to be. And all this is going to be default or be filled in for you because we already set that up when we set up the target group. So next, register targets. Again, this was already done when we registered the targets to the target groups. So I can just now click review and then create. So we will see here that the state is provisioning. So I'm actually going to pause the video and give this a few minutes to come out of the provisioning state. So I will be right back. Okay, I am back, and we now see that the state has been set to active, so we can go ahead and we can actually just test this out. We can just grab the DNS name for the application load balancer and drop it into the browser. And we should see here that it just brings up the Amazon Linux test page. So this is actually just bringing up the test page that I have set up on these 2 particular instances. Now, I know it's pointing to these 2 particular instances because the default target group that I set up for the application load balancer was the picture target group. However, we don't want the test page to be displayed. We actually want to reach the HTML files that I have configured on each one of the particular EC2 instances. So how do we go about doing that? Well, what we can do is we can go back here and we can take a look at both of the particular target groups. So now if I click on the pictures target group and then click on descriptor, we're going to see that this is now associated with the application ELB. However, if I now select the videos, we're going to see that the videos is not currently associated with the application ELB. So now why is that? Well, when I created the application ELB, I had to associate at least one target group with it. However, the videos target group or any additional target groups will not be associated with the Elastic Load Balancer until I actually create content rules that will point traffic to this particular target group. So let's now take a look at rules. So let's go back to the Elastic Load Balancer, click on the listener, and then here we see under listeners here, we see that the listener is listed under port HTTP port 80, and that the default action is to forward it to pictures, to the pictures target group, which is why I know that the Apache test page that we're getting here is actually coming from one of these 2 particular instances. So what we want to do is we actually want to create rules that is going to take traffic based on the path, based on a piece of information in the HTTP path header, and that is going to tell the Elastic Load Balancer where to route the traffic to. So here we see our default rule. Now this rule cannot be changed. We can change the default target group associated with this rule, but this rule is always going to be here and it is always going to be the same. But what we can do is we can add new content-based routing rules. So I go to plus here, I'm going to create an insert rule. I'm going to switch over to path. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use stars here. This is going to be a wild card. So what I'm going to say is that anytime that the path contains the word pictures, again, that's why I'm using the star here. This is the wildcard. So anything in the path that says pictures, point it to the pictures target group. Now I'm going to create a second rule and then for the path, I'm going to say for anything that contains the word videos in the path, point to the videos target group. Now, this is going to now associate the videos target group with our application elastic load balancer. I want to make sure to get in the star here. Make sure to put in stars and not quotation marks, because again, I just wanted to take anything that has the word videos in the path and point it to this target group, and anything that has the word pictures in it and point it to this target group. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, and we'll go back out here. Now, on the EC2 instances that I have created here, so on these two EC2 instances, we want to reach a file called pictures.html, and on these two EC2 instances, we want to reach a file called videos.html. So using the path here that we have, the DNS name for the Elastic Load Balancer, I can just put in /pictures.html. Now, if you see here, what it's done is we've reached the pictures.html file, and it says here you have reached the pictures file on instance pictures 1. So let's say that this is this instance here. This has this particular file on it, pictures 1, and this will be pictures 2. If I just kind of hit now refresh, we'll see here that it's going back and forth between picture 1 and picture 2. So what it's doing is I'm sending a request into the Elastic Load Balancer with a specific content-based rule. It says for anything with the word pictures in the path, send it to these two EC2 instances, and then it's balancing between the two. Now, if I come up here to the path and I change this to videos.html, we now see that it is balancing between video 1 and video 2. So it's now balancing between these two EC2 instances. And how do I know that this is all doing it correctly? Well, the pictures EC2 instances does not have the video.html file on it. So it would be impossible for these two instances to be serving up this HTML file. And it's the same thing that these two EC2 instances don't have the pictures.html file on it. So it would be impossible for, again, traffic coming to these two EC2 instances to serve up the pictures.html file. And again, you see here that we're just now balancing between these two. So what we did was, right, we created an application load balancer, and based on the word pictures or video in the URL path, it is serving traffic to either this target group or this target group, and then balancing internally within that target group. So again, this is how we can take our application and we can break our application up into smaller segments based on specific tasks that each one of those segments are responsible for, and then serve traffic based on certain information placed in the HTTP header to one target group or another target group. And again, if you remember, we can then auto scale and monitor based on specifically the target groups themselves. And if we go back, just for clarity here, if we go back to target groups and we click on videos, we now see, right, that application load balancer is associated with this particular target group, so that we know that everything is connected and working properly. So that is one way to set up and configure a application elastic load balancer. And what is really important just to take away from this is how you can have certain content on EC2 instances in one target group and different content within EC2 instances in another target group. And based on the rules that you set up, you can put specific information in the URL header, and it will then dynamically take that traffic and serve it to the correct target group, and then load balance specifically within those target groups. So with that, we'll conclude this lesson. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.